Started it up. All right, I think we are good. How you doing this week, man?
So far, it's been a wonderful week, especially since the sunshine has returned.
Yeah,
And we've had more tornado warnings and tornadoes in metro Atlanta than I've known in the 20 plus years that I've been in this area.
yeah. It was the weather was pretty wacky the past couple of days. I mean, it's actually still a little chillier than I'm used to around this time, but yeah, the sun has been out. So today was a pretty
Yeah.
nice day. Yesterday was definitely on the chilly side, but that's recovering from the weekend. So
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
yeah, today, um, last week, there was a lot of talk about different. I was seeing people discussing the literacy rates of young black boys and enrollment into colleges and things like that. So that's kind of what I wanted to discuss today. Hang on one second. Update all. Okay, that looks good. Okay. Yeah, so that's kind of what I wanted to discuss today. Talking about really tracing some of my own personal struggles in the school system, kind of how I've navigated up until college and my post career, and kind of how some of the mentality that I adopted as a young student kind of helped and hurt me throughout my career and stuff. So first, I did want to show people some of Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu. Hold on, he's kind of going over just some of what he's one of the people who I started studying probably when I was really getting into like understanding like history and like what's kind of wrong with the black community. So he was definitely somebody who was very pivotal into my education and really motivated me to start doing more in my community as well. So shouts out to him. I actually got one of his books. I think it's hard to see because of the blur effect, but it's critical issues in educating African American youth. So this
Wow.
is like one of his seminars kind of condensed into a book form. So and he has like a lot of other books that he's written. Really a lot of the things that he talks about in his book, like why black men don't go to church, just different things. So he's very insightful, and I'll leave links to all of that in the bio. But yeah, I just really wanted to quickly play just a couple of minutes. This whole video is a gem, but I'm just gonna play it a couple of minutes, get your reaction, and then we can kind of get started with the discussion. So
Cool.
let me see. So he's in a class right now, and he's asking what the parents what they think are the biggest issues when it comes to educating black children.
Understand. In other words, we have integration, or should I be clear, desegregation. But we have many teachers who don't understand the culture of black children. And you cannot teach a child you do not culturally understand. The program is called Closing the Gap, trying to close the gap between black and white student achievement, trying to increase black student achievement. For example, the average white European child on the Iowa California test is scoring at the 60th percentile nationwide. The average white European child in America on the Iowa California test is scoring at the 60th percentile nationwide. The average black African American child in the same test is scoring at the 30th percentile nationwide. Now, what explains this 30-point differential? There are at least 5 different reasons. And I'm in trouble if you give me more than the 5 I'm looking for. But there are at least 5 reasons for this gap. What do you think contributes to this differential between the average white child scoring the 60th percentile on the Iowa and California test and the average black child scoring the 30th percentile on this same test? What are some of the reasons?
Cultural bias in the data.
Okay, and your first name is? Shirley. Can you get a water break because you answered so quickly? So Shirley, I think that's number 4 on my list, and that's the cultural bias of the test. And Shirley, I like to call that the curriculum, not just the test, but the curriculum in terms of their cultural biasness. I want to also look at the issue of methodology, learning styles, and I want to look at what you just mentioned, and that's the evaluation design, the test itself. Any other reasons besides the curriculum, methodology, evaluation design? Any others? Yes. First name?
Gwen.
Gwen.
Perhaps expectations
From whom?
from the teacher.
Okay, very honest group, Gwen. Gwen, that's number 5 on my list. It's not that I place in this category because of its significance or importance. I simply want to save the best for last. I want to talk about everybody else first, and then we'll begin to talk about you. So Gwen, we'll be getting to you in a few minutes. Any others? Yes, first name?
Richard.
Richard.
Expectations from the parents.
Okay, and Richard, that's number 2 on my list. Parental involvement and support. I was wondering if this group would blame the one we love to blame the most, and that's the parents. First name?
Lois.
Lois.
I think the child's expectations.
And Lois, do you mind if we also connect that to self-esteem for students? Okay, so in this case, we're looking at student self-esteem. Now, there's one more, there's probably a lot more, but the other one that we have to have in order to continue, and that's why we have it in the number 1 position, it's so so difficult to identify, and that's the peer group. We are very concerned about the peer group. Now, I'm very proud of this particular group because in most workshops across the country, beside these 4, and the one we were also looking for was the peer group, many times people say, well, it's ability. There's at least 1 or 2 persons in this audience that believe it's ability. And then every once in a while we get someone that also looks at the environmental factors, racism, economic deprivation, sexism. And we acknowledge that. There's no way in the world these stats are not also affected by economic deprivation and racism and sexism. But see, in an hour workshop like this, we may not be able to change how Ronald Reagan thinks, or David Rockefeller, or Caspar Weinberger. We may not be able to change what white men make, $403 a week, and black women make about $234. We may not be able to change that. But we can change the influence of the peer group, parental involvement, student self-esteem, the curriculum, teacher expectation. At least we can make an attempt at that. Now, as I said earlier,
Okay, I'm gonna stop it right there. Like I said, I'll leave the link to that full video in the description for everyone else to check out at a later date. But yeah. So, what are some of your thoughts on hearing? Or also, have you ever heard of Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu before?
Oh my goodness, he's one of our greatest. He's one of the best to ever do it. And he wrote a book entitled Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys. And I encourage all of our viewers to watch this particular video in full, and everything you can get your hands on by Dr. Kunjufu. Now, I have to say this, and it's not that I'm trying to be contrarian. First of all, I need to give this disclaimer for the people who are watching. Now, some people who are going to watch this video later, they already know that I'm a former classroom teacher and a career educator. So I'm not coming at this, and I've taught hundreds of school-age children, so I'm not speculating. One of my teachers, I was listening to him recently, and of course, I've been grappling with this content for a long time because I've been in the classroom. And I'm gonna give you an example of a classroom that I taught in Atlanta. I'm not gonna name the school because do so would disparage that Atlanta public school. But this particular school where I worked at, there was one class that I have to say it was totally out of control. It was the last class of the day, and I finally figured out that the reason why the students behaved the way that they did is because the textbook, this was a seventh grade class, and most of my career was middle school. The textbook that you probably already know where this is going, the textbook that these students were assigned to read, these students, and I'm not exaggerating, were reading on average between first and third grade. And they were being asked to read out of a seventh grade subject area textbook. Science was one of the subjects I was teaching at the time. Rather than let on that they weren't able to read the textbook, which the work proliferated from. We had a curriculum, so this was a necessity. They just acted up the whole time. And there's a lot of people we could place the responsibility on. And in recent years, I think with the DEI movement that we saw implemented, one could say that the powers that be attempted to place more of the onus on that top group that Dr. Jawanza is pointing out. But where I like to land on this now, Apostle Farrakhan makes the point, and he's made it for over 40 years. He says that we are gods. Now, not the Most High God. Our goal is to be in the image of God. He's our Heavenly Father. And I wonder if we were able to help young men, which at least is the focal point of the group, I think, that he's going to talk about in this video and in the notes that I looked at that you shared with me earlier. It's one of the target groups we're going to talk about. What if these young men really saw themselves in the image of God and that there were no impossibilities, and we were able to get that image to them and in them and that belief, then even those people who seek to stifle and control, in the end, those people would not be successful because, as Les Brown says, it's not over until I win. I'm going to say one more thing and then I'm going to let you talk. So many of us watched the NCAA finals, the men's competition between Florida and Houston. For those of us who watched that, now I have to admit that I was rooting for Houston because the coach of Houston, he's been at it for a long, long time. And I wanted him to finally get that chip. And Houston was winning the entire game. But in having the conversation with my son after the game, of course, those of us who watched the game know that Florida won. Florida took the lead with, I think, maybe a minute left in the entire game or less than that, and won the game. I believe that the reason why Florida won has to do with belief. And Florida, from the coach down to every player, even though they faced a formidable opponent in Houston. Houston had knocked off a Goliath, Duke, considered the number one team in the country by many, with the number one player in the country, in the opinion of many. But there's something about believing that you can't lose. And so I wonder if, as great as Dr. Jawanza is, I wonder if we could figure out how to recreate the image maker of our boys. And maybe maybe that starts with the parents. Now we've talked that on different shows about who gets the responsibility, who gets the blame. And I know where someone's going to go, well, what if it never happened for the parents? But at the end of the day, we have to figure out a way to reposition that image. And some people have tried to put the responsibility on the schools, but for me, I feel as though we have to figure out how to get it done in the house first. And I also know that Dr. Jawanza in this list he's going to come up with, he's going to put the responsibility on a lot of people, but I don't hear him put it where it should start, and that's with the father, the black man. To me, it starts there. And so the challenge is to figure out how to get us back into position to help create that positive image for our boys. So I'm going to stop there.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I do think the father is important, but I do how he had his list where he said the peer group is the most important. I would have to really agree with that, because as I'm just thinking about back to my school days, and peers isn't just the other young men around you, it's girls as well. Like, those are all your peers. So just that interaction that you have in school, I think a lot of times, I think there's so many, like, going to school is like going into a mini world. And you have politics there, you got currency, social currencies. So there's just so many different things that people are going to school. Like we talked about, some boys just want to go to school so they could show off their outfits to impress girls, and things of that nature. So I think when it does come to thinking about what's important to young people just in general, and when it comes to school, a lot of times grades becomes a very interesting factor, because you have people who probably education comes more naturally to them. So I think for, like, in my instance, I think I was a pretty good student. I think throughout my whole career, I probably honestly aimed to be a B student. Not saying that I couldn't have gotten higher, but I think I didn't necessarily see the point in my younger years to strive for A. Like, the trade-off at that point was kind of like you had to just kind of fully nerd out in order to get an A. And you still wanted to be
I never
somewhat.
heard that statement. You said fully nerd out
Yeah,
as
you had to,
opposed to
like,
partially nerd out.
it was like, for me, I could get a B pretty comfortably in most of my classes. Now the problem with that is a lot of times when you're aiming for a B, you land lower than what you're aiming. It's like I had a lot of time bringing borderline C's up to a decent grade, and of course I would get some A's from just some elective classes and stuff. So typically I was an A/B student. I graduated high school with a 2.9, so right below a B average, and that was good enough to get into school. But see, I didn't get the Hope Scholarship coming right out of school, which you needed a 3.0 in order to obtain that. So that was really the first time I had an incentive to really strive for more than just a B. I mean, prior to that, I think my motivation was more sports related. Like, of course, I wanted to, make my parents happy, but yeah, when it just came to what do I need in order to make sure that I'm, not looking like I'm dumber than anybody else, or it's still a comparison game. So and I'm just thinking about all the way back in elementary school, like some of the things, reading was something I didn't have. Well, I would say my biggest problem was probably spelling. So that was my biggest challenge in my early school years. And I don't think it was necessarily that I didn't know how to spell. I think that I had so much anxiety around it, like spelling in front of people. Like I hated spelling bees, I hated spelling tests, anything spelling related. And I was, because I've been thinking about well, since last week when they were talking about just the literacy rate of young black boys, and I was like, there was really so much. It was like a stacking of different insecurities for me. Like I was insecure about my spelling, and then I would have bad handwriting to kind of maybe cover up, like if I'm misspelling a word, maybe the teacher won't be able to tell what I, or give me points because they couldn't make it out. So it was just like, I think those were all coping mechanisms that I had in order to try to make myself comfortable. Because I think a lot of kids do register that as pain. Like it's painful to struggle to read. I wouldn't say reading itself is painful or writing itself is painful, but when you're struggling, then you are kind of identified as pain. And I think when you're kind of forced to, well, it's like it's something that you have to get through. It's like you have to do your homework. So then you kind of figure out different ways that you're going to be able to do it. So whether it's like, oh, they tell you got to write a full page, so now you writing big, or you're doing double spaces, so you just come up with a whole bunch of different things in order to kind of grind your way through the pain and anguish of being embarrassed, or feeling like you're not adequate to do certain things. So like when I'm thinking about just my early years in school, I think that really was a lot that I was dealing with. And like my grades weren't necessarily struggling, but me personally, I always felt like I was trying to keep up with other people within my class, and that might not have been the case, but that was just kind of how I was feeling.
And I don't know if our audience can see this group of people off to the right, but of course, Dr. Ben, and the Egyptologist, is
Oh
is one of the best to ever do it
yeah.
amongst us. And one of the things that he did was take us back to the motherland and help us to understand where what our roots are. And that statement is, I didn't even realize that Les Brown was over here when I made that statement. It's not over until I win.
Mm-hmm.
I had shared that particular clip with my son after Florida came back and beat Houston. But then I had an opportunity to meet Dr. Frances Cress Welsing back in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really brilliant sister. And when we think about parenting, one of the tips that she gave an audience that I took and that was helpful to me is that she recommended, as a clinical psychologist, that people not begin their family until they hit 30. Now, that in and of itself is controversial for a lot of people, because they think, well, if you wait until you're 30, shucks, by the time your children are ready to go to college, you might not have enough energy to even goof off with them, or deal with them, I should say. Well, that was a piece of advice that she gave that I took, and it was very helpful. Her idea was that most people, and I'm dealing with the question at hand and my opinion about the parenting piece. I think that in so many instances, people are not mature enough to parent. Now, my grandparents' generation, they started even earlier than my parents' generation. My grandmother was like 14 when she got married. Now, some would say, well, maybe she wasn't mature enough, but the circumstances growing up in 30s and 40s under the conditions that my grandparents grew up in had a way of maturing people faster, whereas the people maybe in Gen X, like myself, who chose to be parents in their 20s, who had been coddled their entire life, maybe for some of us, might not have been ill prepared. It might have been ill equipped to parent. So that's somebody that I would definitely, Dr. Wilson, somebody I would recommend that our audience check out. And then I see for those people who are looking for some tips on how do I become a master educator, which most of the people on this list are. Marva Collins, a lady, a sister that I went to church with, had the opportunity in Alabama to be taught by Marva Collins. And it's nothing like like having the opportunity to be taught by a master teacher. Well, some of us know that Marva Collins went on to write books and be honored by presidents and so forth. But to meet somebody that was actually in her class and have her say that, yeah, she was really that. And my prayer would be that everybody has the opportunity to experience a Marva Collins in their life. In fact, can you think about a time in your educational career where you had an encounter with a master teacher, and what was that like?
I would say master teacher. I would say my first year at GGC, Georgia Gwinnett College. I had a teacher who was an English teacher, but it was a hip hop based English class.
Wow.
Yeah, and that was one of the first turning points in how I looked at education. That was like maybe the first time that I came across something that was like, I guess, remotely interesting to me at that time. I was definitely more into music. Like, I'd always loved music, but then actually being able, and that was the thing, like even when I was in language arts class and we had to bring poetry, I would bring like a hip hop song or something and say that this was poetry, but then to it actually be kind of really revered and celebrated and like studied scholarly, excuse me, in a real college setting really changed how, and that's like, I think that's part of what made me look at music in such a historical fashion now, like, because when I was there, she really put me on. Her name was Professor Uzi Cannon. Shout out to her. I think she still teaches it different. I think at a separate university now, but yeah, just having someone like that who was into the culture, putting us on to just different different artists like that. I think in her class was the first time I heard My Mind's Playing Tricks on Me. So she was just introducing me to a lot of old hip hop, and I remember I wrote, like, I was so inspired by the class. Like, I was like, oh, we finally get to just like, that was something I actually did want to nerd out on, geek out on. So I wrote a whole essay, but it was kind of just like something that I wanted to write. So she didn't give me a good grade, but it was like, because I didn't follow the instructions, I just got so carried away with, I think I was writing a summary on Immortal Technique's song Dance with the Devil. I think that was the name of it. I think that was the name of the song. I can't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, that was like, so that was the first time I went above and beyond. I didn't, even though I didn't get the grade for it, it still was kind of fulfilling and actually showed me that I did kind of care about education at that point. And then one more thing, I did run into another master teacher, but it was for computer science. So one of my professors at Georgia State, I found out, like, he had wrote a book that a lot of people, actually it was a textbook that we were using there. And so that was kind of one of the moments when it clicked. I was like, wow, a lot of these professors are extremely intelligent. Like, of course you would think you would know that, but it's like you don't necessarily give them the proper respect until you realize like, oh, this person is respecting, and you had the ability to access and talk to them and really get knowledge directly from somebody of that caliber. And so those were some of the major turning points in terms of education for me.
How do you spell the first person's name? Oh, Uzi? How do you spell her first name?
Uizz Cannon. Hold on. See, look, I told you spelling isn't my favorite thing. Uzi Cannon. What was her name? I used to follow, like, she was one of the first professors I followed on Twitter. Uzi, yeah. Oh, look, there she goes. Hold on, let me bring her onto the screen. I don't know. I don't think it's switched. Okay, hold on. Share this tab instead. Yep. Uzi. Oh, she might.
Uzzie, you said?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, I see it
Uzi
now.
Cannon.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna look her up. You know, as you were talking, first of all, I challenge all of us to grab a hold of the language that you used right away when you started talking about Professor Cannon. You said it was a turning point for you in your educational career. Now imagine Dr. Jawanza talks about the fact that we lose most Black boys, period, by the time they get to the fourth grade. You, we, thanks probably to your parents, who I got a chance to meet your dad, an awesome brother. You were one of the people that was able to hang in there all the way up until your turning point in college. But most people, by the time, first of all, by the time they get to high school, if they get to high school, I remember as a middle school teacher in New York City, I was a bit confused when I first got to my middle school as to why they made such a big deal out of graduation.
Mm-hmm.
And after a while, I figured out that the reason why they made such a big deal out of graduation is because a lot of those students, that was going to be their last graduation. They were not going to graduate from high school and any other school. Now, some people would say, well, shucks, that's low expectations, but they were just following the stats. And back in the 90s, the streets was grabbing a hold of a lot of young men, and so major challenge. I wonder if our entire educational system would be different if more people were willing to take the kind of risk that Professor Cannon took to come out of the box and actually teach something and teach in a way, because you said she was an English teacher.
Mm-hmm.
So to teach in a way that would actually appeal to the students instead of just this rote stuff that no one or so many people aren't interested in after they walk out of the class.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's hard to get to, because I think that class, that was like my freshman class that I was able to take. But I think even if, I don't know how effective it would have been if it was introduced earlier. Maybe, I mean, it could have garnished the attention of me at a younger age as well, but I think it's still difficult because of the peer group. I think once I was in college and my peer group had changed, I think that had to, or really my peer group shrunk. So before, when you're in high school, you have so many friends and just so many things that are going on that I think it's real difficult to prioritize your education, or really not, because I think a lot of people can be confident that they will graduate or they'll pass, but they don't necessarily, it doesn't matter how well they pass. And then that's when they get to the end and it's like it's kind of crunch time and some people don't end up making it. So, and then you have all these. I was as I was been thinking about it over the past couple of days. It's like, what is in school? What are some of your top, like, what is your top priority? Like, people would say grades, but when you're dealing with hormones and you're trying to, like, you're looking at what's being socially accepted. So it's like a lot of times the people who are performing well with their grades, I'm talking about young boys, but a lot of times that's not necessarily what's attracting girls, which is one of the more important things at that age. And so you're seeing people who aren't, and you're being told that you'll be rewarded for good grades, but none of those rewards are really directly at the time. I mean, you do have to have the foresight to see, like, yeah, if you're not performing well in school, then you're gonna have problems outside of school. And I think that was the next thing that I wanted to tell is, like, where grades, how school grades kind of translate into real life. Like, if you were an A student, there's a very high chance that you succeeded in life because you were used to going above and beyond, or maybe not super successful, but you are probably in a decent space. People who were getting B's are still, can kind of maintain, get by. People who were making C's, D's, and F's, it's like you kind of see where they rank, like, in terms of tiers in life quality. I think in some, or I don't know for a fact, that's just kind of me me talking, but I'm sure there will be some type of correlation. And I see it similar because once I got to college, I saw different levels of people, how people took school seriously. So some people took it very seriously, and they then got, they got decent jobs after. But what I found in school was there was another trade off. So the people who were getting straight A's were lacking in that social aspect. So, and not all people who were getting straight A's, but I'm just saying a good majority of the people who I know who were getting straight A's were getting straight A's because they weren't doing anything outside. And what that does is it hurts your networking ability. So it's like, even though they're smart enough to get some of the top level jobs, if your network isn't there, then you're not going to necessarily have those opportunities to get some of those positions. And that's kind of what I'm seeing as throughout my career. There's a lot of highly intelligent people who I've worked with at past jobs, and it's like they're not making the money that they need to make, not because they don't deserve it, or it's just the fact that they're not social enough or confident enough in themselves to kind of put themselves out there, go talk to people, find out what other people are making, compare. So it's there's really, you have to have some type of balance, and I think that's kind of underlooked a lot of times.
You as you were talking, you made me think about something, and it's probably a mistake that I have made and many of us have made. Number one, thanks to social media, just like you were able to find Professor Cannon on the internet, I want to encourage all those people who are watching and will watch this. If you had a teacher who was that turning point person for you, find them on Facebook or Twitter, or a lot of them, if they're my age or older, might have to go to Facebook. I know a lot of you not on Facebook, but those who are still in the classroom and hip, like Professor Cannon, you may find them on Twitter or even IG. But my point is that as you yourself have said in times past, Dre, that the idea of being in the classroom is daunting,
Mm-hmm.
and especially today because so many students operating super distracted, and a lot of really solid educators are leaving the profession in droves, and it may be even more of that with what's going on recently with the obliteration of the Department of Education. So for a lot of educators to hear your testimonial, my testimonial, like, wow, you were that person that represented the turning point. And like Dr. Jawanza gets in a lot of his materials, I remember as a black man being an anomaly, very few of us in the school.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to find more of us in the school as you get into the higher grades, but in the lower grades, you really are not going to see many of us. And so, uh, I've often been fond of asking, taking the survey, when was your first encounter with a black man that was not the gym teacher in your school? And for a lot of people, they can think of somebody, it was in high school, maybe in middle school, but usually that first encounter is high school. That was not the gym teacher or possibly the principal.
That's how it was for me.
And so, yeah, yeah. And so I think that, a story that I'm fond of referring to by the greatest teacher of all time, Yahushua, most people know him as Jesus. I like to call him by his Hebrew name. There's a story where someone comes back to him to show gratitude. And before the person could get their thanks out, he was asking about the others who had been cleansed. And so I think that um, we have to do a better job of appreciating those who have poured into us and really put their life on the line for us. Um, that's an important part of this piecing of closing the achievement gap, because if you can keep the best educators in the game, that's part of how we can get closer to where we're trying to get to, instead of just being left with the people who are there for the paycheck.
Right. I mean, it's hard to say that the people are there solely for the paycheck, because there's not much money in the school system, which is why they don't have as many. I mean, I think raising the pay for teachers is a necessity if we care about the future of our country in general. But at the current rates, that's why we don't have any. It's just a lot of people don't find it to be lucrative enough to deal with a lot of the issues, because I know as a black man, if I was going into the school systems, I understand that I'd be having to do much more than just be a teacher. Like, yes, you're a counselor, a therapist, a mentor. So it's like you're now wearing all of these hats. You have all of this responsibility. You have the fate of these young black students and all these, just the students in general, in your hands. And, that becomes a lot of pressure that it's the trade-off just doesn't, like, you have to, I'll say you just have to do it for the love. Like, you can't really, it's not something you can get paid for. So I think we're really in a difficult spot, and I think a lot of the only way you can get some is through the gym programs, where they feel that they can, help some of the kids achieve some of the dreams that they might have had, or they can kind of see themselves in some of the kids who have hoop dreams, or plans of going to the NFL. So that's where you get a lot of black men who are do invest in the educational system, but that's still sports related. So it's like we need to. I think a big problem is too. So many black men who do make it out of school are afraid to go back, and it's like it's such an uncomfortable relationship that a lot of us have with the school systems, whether it was because they were getting in trouble because they didn't feel that they were smart enough, or just maybe even memories of being bullied. Like a lot of the smart ones don't go back to school because school reminds them of times when they were getting bullied for being smart. So there's so many layers to that conversation that it would be hard to talk about, to discuss all of them. But one thing I did want to kind of take is or pivot to was talking about how it's affected me and my profession moving forward, because I think I've had a lot of issues when it comes to just being confident in, like, I have so much more technology that spelling isn't necessarily an issue. Like when I'm writing an email, things may I can double check myself. So there's so many more tools that make me more comfortable in doing a lot of the things that I can do, but that's something that I had to like kind of force myself to learn over the years. And I think that's a difficult thing for a lot of, like, when I talk to other people about trying to redo their resume and stuff, that's such a daunting task to them, and it's probably for similar reasons to me, where they're not the most confident in their reading skills, they're not the most confident in their spelling ability. So I think that's such a big barrier of especially black men getting positions that would pay up, would actually be worth them spending some time to do. And it's a lot of, I've had to do, really, college wasn't enough in my profession as a software developer. When I right out of college, I wasn't getting any positions. I had to take my education another step and go get some formal training from a boot camp in order to land some of the positions that I have. And once I found out about that, I was like, oh man, this was I wouldn't say it was a better route, because I've seen how my degree has benefited me later on in my career. But it's like, without that experience, the degree doesn't really do much unless you have certain connections. And one more story before, and then I'll let you talk. But there was a young white boy who was in my boot camp. So he was coming right out of right out of high school, about to go to BYU, I believe. And I was like, wow, this. And he was one of the smartest in the class. Like, he picked up on coding way faster than I did, and I just got my degree. So of course that didn't make me it. A lot of people who are developers suffer from what they call imposter syndrome. So where you feel like you're not really worthy to be there. So it's taken a lot of different positions for me to like actually feel confident in calling myself a developer. So it was really a fake it till you make it type of situation. But in the case of that young man, I was like, man, he has the keys already. Like, just the fact that he was taking this program to prepare to go to school was just mind blowing to me. And it really opened my eyes to just the different paths that some other people are on. And I'm not sure where he's at now, but I mean, he was intelligent. I'm sure he was successful. But then also when I'm in some of the companies that I've worked at, I'm realizing like, yeah, I'm working right next to some people who went to Ivy League schools. Like, so just seeing the how hard they might work or how much attention to detail they pay to certain things. That's something that I've analyzed and realized that I do lack some of that in my own professionalism when I'm working in some of these companies. And I think I was talking to my sister. My sister, she had an internship, and I think that really helped ease her into the kind of corporate lifestyle. And that's something that I never really had the chance to do. Like, the boot camp was great for equipping me with the skills that I needed, but in terms of like the pace that things need to get done in corporate, that was something that no one has the time to hold your hand through any of that. So you really just have to pick it up on your own, and if you can't do it, then you're out of there. So
You right. You better believe it. It's sink or swim.
it
It's
is.
sink or swim. And a lot of people, it's funny that you mentioned holding hands because, again, referencing Dr. Jawanza again, one of the problems that he says that interferes with the development, particularly of black boys, is when they're over coddled, often by their mom. And it's said that, mothers raise their daughter and coddle their sons. And it works the other way with the men. The problem is that oftentimes the father's absent, so he doesn't get the opportunity to coddle his daughter and raise his son. So the
Mhm.
boy ends up, sometimes rotten. But anyway, when that boy gets out into the world, people are not going to coddle him, and so that's where he ends up in a predicament because he's used to being coddled at the house, and now he's because he's handsome and he's doted on, and people giggling when he's cussing and stuff in the house. It's sink or swim when you get out there in the world. I wanted to address something that you said though about the college degree not being enough. I never forget one of my classmates, Leote, my first year at Syracuse. We were in the library one day, and she said a woman that she knew made a statement that stuck with her, and she passed it on to me. And that statement was that college was the place that we went to learn how to learn. And perhaps the reason why you then had to do the boot camp was because you learned how to learn in college, and now you were ready to learn when you went to the boot camp. Now, possibly, if we had had a totally different experience K through 12, maybe we could have learned how to learn before college. And I dare to say some people do. Maybe the guy who was going to BYU, maybe he had learned how to learn previously.
Mhm.
So I would say that you probably were in good company in that respect because a lot of people, that's what college is. You learn how to learn, and then you move on and learn from there.
Right.
But I want to also comment on something you said about your transition from high school to college and the Hope Scholarship, which for those people who don't know, it's something that we get here in Georgia to help support our education. And as Dre said, you have to have at least a 3.0 to get to get it. Well, as you were saying that, I was thinking to myself, I wonder if somewhere along the line the information about Hope Scholarship had come, but it had not come often enough. And as an educator, I have to remind myself, and as a parent, the challenge is the importance of repetition because in a lot of Black households, it's said, I'm not going to repeat myself.
Mhm.
And actually, repetition is a key to learning. Now, we might, because people tend to get bored so quickly, we might have to create different ways of saying the same thing. And that's why sometimes we use different voices to repeat a message. But as you were talking, I said, okay, for an example, me, I primarily used academics to help me on my journey, but I could have also used athletics. And I was, as you was talking, I said, well, did someone tell me that I could? Of course they did, but it probably wasn't repeated enough and in a way that sunk in. And so the repetition piece is really important. We have to, and some people, like I had an uncle, he was really good at repeating things.
Mm-hmm.
And he repeated things so much that eventually at just the right time it locked in, like, oh, okay, now I get what he was saying. Now I don't know if he was doing that on purpose. I mean, from an educational standpoint, I think that he just chose to say what he said, and he would say it and say it and say it. But there's something to repetition, and so let's not be shy of repeating things because people are not usually not going to get it the first time anyway.
Right. Yeah, no, I think I wasn't really even concerned with college, honestly, until I think once I didn't have necessarily hoop dream. I always wanted to go to the NBA or to the NFL, of course, but once I kind of got in my head that that wasn't really gonna be, or I saw just how much harder I was gonna have to work in order to, especially in Gwinnett County schools, trying to just get like, because I saw how hard people were going on the athletic side. So like, that's the thing. It wasn't that the boys are lazy or anything, but they're putting in a lot of other work into places where they feel will benefit them more. So a lot of people feel like that's on the football field. So it's like they feel if they get decent enough grades and then their athletics, and then they can get a ride um, to college, then that's more worth it than putting in for the grades. Because that, then we go back to the trade-off, because it's like, okay, if you're good at sports is way more attractive, it's way more socially accepted than getting grades. So it's like you could get to the same place, be popular, and get all the girls, do it, like, just be that person, and still, get to what everyone is saying the end goal is. So it's like more people just want to try that route, and see how far they can get doing that. So I think it's when it comes to sports, and then it's like everyone has the same mentality, so that's really when the competitiveness kicks in, because it's like, well, I mean, I don't want to if this person can do it, then I know I can do it. So you're seeing other people actually succeed, go to get full rides to school off of football, off of basketball, and so you're like, well, that's what the way I want to get there too. It's the cooler. I think it's just the cooler route overall. And then for me, once I realized that it wasn't gonna happen for me, then that's when I started working. So I was just working at first I was cleaning out foreclosed homes, a real one of the worst jobs, making like $85 a day, regardless of how long you worked. And then I went to Pizza Hut when I got my car. So, and then that was really the rest of my time in school. And still, going to work was more important to me than grades, because it's like, why if I'm going to school so I can make money. But to me at that time, that was great money. I didn't know all the everything I would have to pay for in the future, and I was thinking I could just be a delivery driver for the rest of my life. So shooting low. But that's just one of the things that I think we don't really talk about when it comes to education. Like, what are the true motivating factors, or how are we incentivizing young boys to learn more? Like, what is the dream that we're selling them with education? And I don't think we ever really do a good job of that.
Yeah, there's so many different tentacles to it because, as you were talking about, many many boys aspire to get into entertainment, whether it be sports or becoming the next little baby. And the reality is that there's only a small percentage that will do that. And even the people who rap, you you have a lot of people out there who rap, but the amount of rappers who are getting to the real bread, so to speak, is not a lot. And in another one of these podcasts, I talked about a book that I came across years ago called Freakonomics.
Hmm.
And this economist had done a study to show the percentage of people on the streets, for an example, who, again, interestingly enough, hip hop glamorizes street life, but only a small percentage of people who are scrambling, as we used to call it, are actually making any money to speak of. In fact, most of the guys are below poverty in what they're actually making, and they become big time homosexuals and so forth.
Hmm.
So I recently was really impressed with a young man who got a job in a really solid trade straight out of high school, mechanics.
Hmm.
Now, of course, mechanics has changed a lot over the years, especially with the rise of the electric car. But again, like I was talking to this brother, shout out to Truth, who I was talking to on Sunday. And, one of the things that I'm always advocating for is getting brothers involved in the community and the schools and so forth. And I was at an event recently, and Truth came up to me and he said, "Hey man, I need to get involved with a Boys and Girls Club or something." And of course, I had just the one for him, and I connected him to it. And I was really impressed by not only him saying that he wanted to get involved, but he had a specific place he wanted to get involved. There's a process to doing it because, of course, those organizations need to make sure that they're not going to just have anybody around children. But considering all that we've said about that, I was really happy to have him come up to me and say that. But uh, he's in the Truth is in the HVAC industry,
Okay.
another really strong industry. And he was saying that we will always need plumbers, we will always need carpenters. And back in the shucks, as recently as the 80s, when I was in grade school, they still had trades in high school. But the criminals who Dr. Jawanza had on the top of his list, they saw fit to take the trades out of the schools on purpose. But being the criminals that they are, we know who they are. So that means that the people who have the wherewithal in our community, that just means that we have to step up and recreate those institutions. We know that before so-called desegregation, we had to create those institutions for self. And so nothing's really changed as far as that's concerned. So the onus still lies on us to create those institutions and to put our heads together. So often the reason why we can't put those things together is because there's such a focus amongst brothers to compete as opposed to figuring out how to complete the community, you know. And that ethic of competition sort of, some of it has to do with testosterone, but then you have to get past that Neanderthal person and look at, okay, what is it that I ultimately want to see for my children and my children's children, and what skills do I have to bring to the table to make that happen? And so sometimes people want to put all the responsibility on Shaq and, oh, if I was a multimillionaire, I would do that and this. You're a liar because you got enough coins to do something. You're doing exactly what you plan to do. Zero.
That's true. Yeah, as you were talking, I remembered one of the black teachers I had. He was a football coach as well. It was called him Coach Battles. He told me and some of my friends right before, like right at graduation, he said, he had listed out a couple of professions that we would always need. He said, people will always get sick. Um, Women will always have babies. People will always die and will always need computers. And I think it was something about law, or people will always break the law. So it was like those were 5 things that you can do that would, people will always need. So for people who are trying to figure out what they want to do next in life, if you're in high school and trying to think about what the next step is, just kind of keep in mind, think to be more of an innovator. Don't think of necessarily a job that you want to have. And I think I didn't have any concept of what type of job or career that I wanted in high school. Only careers I knew of were football career, basketball career, rap career, and like my mother was in education, so I knew I didn't want to be a teacher at that, especially not that young. I didn't want to be a teacher and go back into school or anything. And my dad was working with computers, so that was kind of why I gravitated towards computers. But I wanted younger people to really don't chase a position or think about something that you could see that you want to contribute to, and think about how you can innovate it if you really want to make money. Because if you're just going to get a job, you're going to get very tired of it very quickly. Once you're not making, you may even be making the money that you want, but if it's not something that you truly care about, the money's not going to matter after a while, because this is really going to be where you're spending a majority of your time doing something. So it's like, if it's something that you don't love, then, or something that you don't care about enough to want to see it improve, then you're setting yourself up for misery. And that's whether you're going to a trade school or whether you're going to university or college. So just be very mindful of think in terms of career and like where you can see yourself later down the line. And also think about once you leave high school, I want you to think about what type of business that you can build. I'm not saying that everyone needs to be an entrepreneur, but think about how, if you were to improve one factor or one fraction of society, what would you choose to do and how would you improve that? And when you answer those questions, then kind of use that as your motivation to make it through classes. Because if you're just going through classes just trying to get grades, like I had always had something bigger to kind of focus on, and that was the concept of building a music app. That was the only thing I went to college to try and do. I was like, I think it would be cool. I'd originally wanted to build like a physical radio, so I was trying to be an electrical engineer. I don't even know if that was the proper the proper major to achieve something like that, but that was always what I had in my head, and I always centered all of my projects around the concept that I wanted to do something with music. And that's something I'm still pursuing today, and that's what keeps me going. While we're able to do these podcasts, it's all stems from the passion that I had leaving high school. So whatever it is, just make sure that you don't have to lose the passion. Just figure out what's the best way to improve it and enhance it, and hopefully make a living for yourself.
So I don't want some people to get confused because I want them to make sure they heard the whole story, because there's some young person that might hear what Dre just said and say, yeah, I'm only going to follow my passion. I'm only going to do what I love. But you're missing it, because you also heard him say that he was cleaning out foreclosed homes before he got into the position. So it was a process to get to that point. And some of you are spending all day at home, beating off and smoking weed because you're not going to do anything but pursue your rap career. But you need to get some bread coming in so that you can get to your rap career. And so you missing it if you think that you're going to be totally um, shiftless in the meantime. You will probably have to do. There's so many stories of famous actors and even athletes who had to take menial gigs, small jobs, on the way to get to what they really want to do. Just recently I was talking to a young lady who impressed me. She's got a lot of entrepreneur in her. She happens to be in the hair game. Before that, she was just doing fast food jobs that she hates. But it took her getting through that hate to do what she loves. As for some people, that's not their thing. But don't miss it. Don't think that you can just be idle and get into that love space, because that's not how it works. And one more thing, I was thinking about this whole idea of repetition. So, in some cases, I can think about actually being repetitious. And part of being young is sometimes choosing to bump your head, because, once upon a time, even though for some of you, you can't imagine with all this white that at some point I was in my 20s, but I was, and wanting to do it my way, even though I was being told, hey, you should do it this way. And then after I bumped my head enough times, I realized, oh, that's a good idea over there. And so there's a saying that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. It's not that the teacher appeared out of thin air. It's that the student woke up and said, "Okay, I'm bleeding here. Feel like I got a concussion. Let me let me see what you're saying now."
Yeah, no,
So I think some of that is, it is what it is. Some people, that's the path that we choose. Now, for the most part, I use I usually like to learn through other people's experience, but I've I've, I've got some lumps from learning from my own experience too. Don't even get it twisted.
yeah, no. I think the 20s is. I don't think anyone in their 20s actually fully listens. I think once I turn 30, I'm like, oh, okay, maybe. I'm looking back on my 20s like, okay, yeah, I could have done things a lot differently, but I mean, that's why I have so much. I do have a lot of patience with the youth. I know a lot of people are hard on them, and a lot of people give up on them very early because I think so many people see themselves in the youth, like they see their failures, and it's like, and I'm sure that's how people who were ahead of people my age were looking at us as we continued to make mistakes. So I try and have a lot of grace for young people finding their way, making mistakes, because without any real guide rails, like a lot of people are just out here on their own. So many people don't have real parents to turn to, even if their parents are in their lives. Sometimes their parents are even like they've learned everything that their parents could possibly teach them and more, and so now they're still just kind of stuck out here trying to figure things out. So many kids don't have mentors these days, so everyone is just kind of left fending for themselves, and whatever they feel is right, then that's kind of how things go. I'm hoping that as time moves forward, that we can really create some better spaces to help engage with the youth, because I think that the school is just now so negative. It's just portrayed so negative to a lot of the young kids that they don't want anything to do with it, and any help that can come from it is kind of just stifled because of their negative relationship with school.
Before we wrap, there's a couple of things I wanted to touch on because in the topic that overview that you had initially shared with me, one of the things that you mentioned was some of the challenges that our students face. And one of the challenges that I dealt with a lot in the early 2000s and in the 90s as a classroom teacher was a high incidence of ADHD. Now, some of that had to do with parents who were addicted to narcotics, and as a result, and I'm talking about, of course, a lot of the students from the inner city. Now, these days, with the opioid crisis, that is, taking things to another level. But in talking to a number of educators in the last 10 to 15 years, the number of students, particularly boys, and a high number of black boys are struggling with autism.
Mhm.
And so I think that for those creatives, perhaps a avenue that you can play a heroic role is to come up with ways to engage those young people who are challenged in that way. I never forget a watching, I think it was a 60-minute special years ago. It featured this young man who, if I'm not mistaken, his challenge was autism. And a number of people who deal with that challenge, they may have a major deficit in one area and then just be off the charts genius in another. And this young man that was featured, he had a I'm just going to say he had a bionic memory. He happened to be an artist,
Mhm.
but he had a bionic memory, and they did this flyover.
Oh,
I
okay.
think it was Washington D.C. or some
Mhm.
metropolis like that. I don't know if you saw that one.
Yeah, I've seen them.
This guy was able to recreate, recreate that scene right down to the minute detail. So the question becomes, how do you how do you teach someone who's that genius in one area, but then maybe in the 10th grade and reading on the second grade level or something like that? So we've got some really unique challenges, and a lot of people don't agree with them or angry with them for pointing out, but RFK has done some research that shows that unfortunately, black boys have suffered disproportionately from autism in recent years over and above other ethnic groups. Why? There's a lot of suspicions, but whether we agree on why, the numbers don't seem to lie.
Mhm.
And so there's a lot of parents that could appreciate additional support, and um, there's a an additional challenge today in the schoolhouse that wasn't as prevalent 20 years ago.
Hmm. Yeah. As my mom, she was a occupational therapist, so she got me tested for dyslexia. That's where you kind of miss, m- mi- excuse me, kind of mix up some letters. Like I had a real problem with B's and D's in my
Mhm.
younger, which goes on to the spelling, and it was like, to me, it was something that I couldn't even, like, a lot of times I wouldn't even notice when I did it, but at the same time I didn't think it was that difficult to kind of get over. You know, I don't think I don't struggle with it today, but I also don't write as much today. So um, I that's why I'm like, I think it's deeper than just mixing up my B's and D's. I think it was just, I feel like it was a control thing, possibly, like, or pushing the limits. I think a lot of times when black boys have learning disabilities, because I mean, I've dealt with young boys who are in school, and just like trying to help them with their homework and stuff, and it's like they know what they they know the answer, and a lot of times it's like, I just don't want to give you the right answer. Or, when they say, if Johnny has 5 apples, then how, like, when they get into and he eats one, how many apples does he have left? And it's like they kind of freeze up on those type questions. I think it's I think it's like a almost just rebellion, and I think I did want to kind of tie the rebellion that a lot of young boys display in school in relation to hip hop, because I think that that's a really strong correlation in just like, even when we talk about peer groups in terms of like what's popular, what we're supposed to do, like even how hip hop kind of praises people, like the law being broken. It's kind of like in school, it's funny to get in trouble, or be cause a ruckus, or have everyone look at you. So those are like, that's where I think the balance comes, or not even the balance, but I think that's where the disparities come in, because it's like, yeah, they don't. A young boy might not value the grade, but they might value the attention that they get for struggling more. Like, I think that's a big issue. So then in their mind, they're like, oh well, if I just continue, if I really do have problems, then then I get extra attention, or I get special attention. And I think that could have been something that was going on with me at a young age as well. And I think that's where it becomes like a real, I think so many boys like tell themselves that so much that after a while, then they really do not have the confidence to read correctly or spell correctly, because they're just waiting for, like you said earlier, getting coddled, and into the point to where they handicap themselves. Because I feel like even today, there's nothing that I don't feel like I'm capable of learning. And when I'm looking at these young boys, I'm like, there's nothing that you're not capable of learning, but it's kind of like a mental block that you put on yourself.
Dre, you make some really good points, because even going back to the students that I referenced earlier in that class, where I felt the number one issue was that students were hiding the fact that they weren't able to read. I also think that there was an authentic level of rebellion,
Hmm.
which is the point that you're making now. We don't have enough time to take things to church, but Dr. Jawanza, as you mentioned early on, he delves into some of that, and there is a spiritual part of us. A third of us is spiritual, and so when you talk about hip hop and this whole bad boy push and so forth, I probably mentioned it on this podcast before, but one of the people that I really respect a lot in hip hop is Master P. He's doing so many things right, and he made the comment recently that he feels that the streets has been backwards in celebrating the guy who comes back home who was on lockdown. You know, we throw him a party
Hmm.
because he done did something did something wicked in many cases, and now he's coming back home. He's celebrated like he's Nelson Mandela or something. And meanwhile, you got some young cat from around the way that graduated from college, nothing, no response at all. And so that no wonder that the next generation don't have an interest in going to college because look at who got celebrated.
Right.
And I know somebody, one of my former clients, she experienced that firsthand. She was the one who went to college and went to the military, and she was treated like the stepchild in her own family. Her brother, you know, got went away and came back, and everybody embraced him like he was a hero. So
Hmm.
things are sort of backwards.
Another thing along the lines of those are people getting commemorated for getting shot and killed. At, like, some of the, I think a lot of kids, and it leads to kids wanting to kind of go out when blazing glory, kind of like, they want to go out in some action packed way, which is kind of more like self deletion thoughts, but I don't want to use the word, but I think that is a very, when we're talking about
Yeah,
motivations, like
yeah.
when we want to talk about young black boys getting validated, like, yeah, we see people being celebrated for going to for coming home from prison, for getting commemorated on a t-shirt, like people have a RIP, your name lives forever. And so it's like, if you don't feel like you don't if you don't know what direction you want to go in life, then living forever but going out like in a certain way might sound better to you than just being a nobody. Like, a lot of kids are, I think that's maybe black boys biggest fear, is just ending up being a nobody. I think that's really what they fear, and that's why you see them live out the gangster lifestyle, trying to get as much money as they can, so they're just trying to be remembered in some capacity.
And you know what's so crazy in terms of that remembered thing? I came across something maybe a month or two ago about a case that is either going on or recently came to an end where some guys who were in trouble, some of the guys that were in trouble were also in the rap game, and some of the folks who were involved had bragged about the heinous act they had done and put it on a t-shirt, or
Mm-hmm.
it was something crazy like that. Anyway, some of this is just wicked and motivated by the lower power. I mean, there's no other way to put it, you know. And once upon a time in the Black community, there was a reverence for the book that Big Mama would open up and speak from. But as time has gone on, less and less reverence for that, and more and more worship of self. And there's no way up if man is the end of himself. No way up.
We're right about it. Hour and 30. So I think that's probably a good little place to put a pin in it. No, we could probably talk about this for for hours for real, but I think we got a good chunk of the discussion, the open dialogue out of it. Yeah, for people, once again, we were watching Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu. I'll link the actual video that I played a clip from in the description. I also put a link to his website where he has a handful of books that are built for education of young Black boys and girls. He's a very intelligent man, so definitely encourage you to look out. Maybe get something for your child from here, or your little brother, little cousin, something. But yeah, you had any last thoughts?
Yeah, well, thanks again for another great show, Dre, and keep doing what you're doing. And I want to encourage our audience to like, share. And obviously, we have these conversations to spark conversation. And our hope is that, the conversation will continue amongst those people who listen, and they use this conversation to continue the conversation. So the idea is not for it to stop here, it's for it to continue. And hopefully some people will be motivated to do something to be a part of the solution, even if it's just a matter of what they do with their own children, with their own sons. So that'll be it. We thank everybody for tuning in, and we appreciate everybody.
Yes, and please share your thoughts on what we've discussed today. So, did you have a similar experience in your education, upbringing? Do you feel that some of the things that we said were off the mark? Please, we're here to have open discussion. We're not claiming to know everything. We're just speaking based off of our experiences from our hearts, and we really have we're not being sponsored by anything. So this is all pure, just conversation and concern for our community. So please join the conversation, whether it's on YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, whatever platform you're watching on. Don't feel scared to just let your voice be heard. And if you ever want to come and talk to us, then just reach out, and we'd love to have you on. We want to bring after last episode, that episode was fantastic. T Bless, shout out to her. She would have been great for this conversation as well, or maybe we can have one with her in the future. I know I told my cousin we were gonna try and fit her on at one point too. Yeah, so this is once again, like, we're trying to build a community here. So it starts with these discussions. It don't matter if you see this in 5 years. If you still feel that you want to comment on this, please let your voice be heard. It's all valuable. We do thank you for taking the time to watch this, and we hope that you guys continue to be successful in whatever endeavors you choose to participate in. So we want to say thank you, like, comment,
Dre, are you
share.
still going to be?
Hmm.
Are you still going to? You still going to be doing a show tomorrow as well?
Um, we can. Yeah, I'm not against it. I've
No,
been.
no. I'm saying I think you was going to be doing one with with a guest. I was just going to say
Oh,
plug it if you're still
oh,
doing
oh.
it.
We had to move that to probably next week. That was gonna be with my brother.
Okay,
Yeah, and then
okay,
I've
okay.
been doing morning.
Because
Hmm. You were saying the next.
because our next scheduled one is next week anyway. So I guess
Okay.
he'll be joining us on that one.
Yeah, he said he's available Thursday, so yeah, we can he can join that one, or he said he was. I'll talk to you on it about it
That's
off
fine.
on
That's
that.
fine. Yeah, that'll be fun. Yeah, I'm all for that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll let him know that Thursday you'll be good. I didn't know if you wanted to do the next week since we did it this week, but yeah, we can do. I'll do it on there. That'll probably be cool. Um, I
Okay.
forgot. But yeah, I have been doing. I started the Sauce Radio in the morning, so where I'm just kind of streaming music. I'm I'm taking it slow right now. I'm doing Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays for right now, to where I'll have like be playing for like about an hour and a half, just music on a playlist. And right now I've been separating it into like BPM, so beats per minute. But eventually I'm gonna start doing throwbacks. I did one album review of the Supreme Jubilees. Um, their album "It'll All Be Over."
Mm,
Yeah, so I did a quick review to that. So
okay.
we're trying to do some new type of content here. So yeah, if you ever wanna, cause now really remember before I didn't want to do music live because of the copyright issues, but since on YouTube we're not monetized, it's like yeah, you can just put it up, try and gain a following. So that's what I'm doing. So yeah, we can yeah, if you want to do a music pod one day, we can do that. Or just talk about an album. That might be fun for us to dissect the album together, something. So got a lot more things on the plate, a lot more content coming your
Well,
way.
well, you know that I'm on in some of my other work. I'm uh, on the gospel focus end. So, if our audience is open to a show that is, like that, then yeah, we can definitely. Yep.
Okay. Well, all right, people. Thank you so much once again. I won't give a whole nother outro, but we will see you guys next time. Until then, everyone stay blessed.